So I think I'm actually much excited for this next session because we have four successful entrepreneurs who raise money from VCs, and I'm seeing lots of articles about them, lots of news. So I'm really delighted to have all of you, and I would actually invite Uday to take the lead in it. So I'll just put the spotlight on Uday.
Yep. Can you hear me, Jagdish?
Yes, Uday.
Okay. Thank you. So I think so far we have had actually a wonderful two sessions. So in your mini MBA, the first chapter will be understanding the ecosystem for startups in India. I think Dr. Swaroop did a brilliant job of highlighting all of that. And I think the second chapter has to be, how do I choose an incubator? And I think within that, the mini message of valuation and parting with equity is actually a very important point, largely because I have found that most science turned entrepreneurs or scientists have this mentality that it's my idea, I need to own 100% of the company. It really doesn't work like that. I'll just give you a simple message that Dr. Reddy, who was my boss and my mentor, would always tell me, Uday, 100% of zero value is still zero. So unless you cannot create value, there is no point on you holding on to 100%. So I think that's a very important message for entrepreneurs to understand that at some time or the other, they will have to give up something as long as what you get back in return is bigger than what you're giving up. So just remember that. That message of Dr. Reddy comes very often to me back. So moving along on that, and we have four rock stars. I think as somebody just mentioned, we have four rock stars today who have really made fantastic progress and really showing the path to other entrepreneurs. I know two of them extremely well. Anand and Shishir are people that I've know. The other two, it's the first time that I'm meeting them. It's my pleasure. Izil and Arun, I have heard a lot about you, mostly good, but I have heard a lot about you. So very happy to connect with you and move forward. So I think what we're going to do is we are going to keep it as a free flowing fire chat, which means I will just pose a question to each of the individuals, not the same one, different one, with the idea of trying to understand how they got into this business and how they become successful. Because at the end of the day, I think understanding that pathway that they took and why they took and how they overcame obstacles is really what it's all about. So let me very quickly introduce all of them to you. I'm just going to read it off the list that I have here. Dr. Izil is a scientist, innovator, thinker, hiking enthusiast, and a citizen of the world. She's driven by passion to leverage the power of biology, and her experience in bio-based product over the last year helps her bring deep tech expertise to the work at String Bio that she runs today. So welcome, Izil. Very nice meeting with you online. Arun is the next one that's here. Arun Chandru, who runs Pendurum. Arun comes from an academic background. He's focused on solid rocket propulsion, advanced manufacturing, everything I know nothing about actually. So but welcome, Arun, and he has been named in the Forbes Asia Under 30 2016 Healthcare and Science. So congratulations and very nice to meet you as well. So Shishir, Dr. Shishir, I know him extremely well. I've actually literally seen him grow in front of my eyes as an entrepreneur. I hope he recollects the many different BIG grant committees I was on. Some of them we funded. You've still not offered me a free lunch, but that's okay. I'm not holding that against you. But Shishir has a PhD in molecular virology, and he founded RAS with Dr. Rachna and currently taking care of operation, sales, and marketing of a new spin out called Huwell Products, and very successfully launched many products that I think India badly needed. So welcome, Shishir. Very nice seeing you again. Last but not the least is Anand. Dr. Anand Kumar Anand is co-founder, CEO of Bugworks, an Indo-US antimicrobial resistance startup. I think they are working on something that could be game changer. As you know, antibiotic resistance is probably one of the biggest problems we have in the world today. And his company is designing next generation antibiotics that tackle a broad spectrum of superbugs and have already entered clinical trials from what I remember. So warm welcome to you, Anand, and really nice seeing you again too. So I am just going to ask questions in the sequence that I see you on my screen, and I see Anand first. So Anand, I'm going to ask you you can tell us stories about this. True or false doesn't matter as long as it's an exciting story. What made you do a startup? I mean, was it a thought that came up while you were taking a shower or driving or dreaming, or does it run in the family? I mean, I'd really like the audience to know how you turned to entrepreneurship and a
Right.
little bit of history and background on that. So,
Thank you, Uday, and thank you to FABA, the organizers, to give us this opportunity, and lovely to be these fellow panelists. So I have to say a story and keep it very short. Uday, so I actually come from a semiconductor background. I used to design computer chips in the United States before I came back to India. And I did a couple of startups in the electronic space when, electronics outsourcing was just booming and they got acquired. And then it was actually a major health setback that I suffered, Uday, that almost wiped me out. They got me thinking that maybe I was meant to do something in healthcare. Plus, I came from a family filled with doctors who were doing a lot of work in medicine, etc. My entrepreneurship journey started with semiconductor and then bled over into biotech, and started a cancer company called Cellworks, which is a precursor to Bugworks. And there we said, India is perfectly placed to bring mathematics, modeling, simulation, electrical engineering into biology. It was too siloed, and the biologists were quite boring that we were working with because they were just, too deep like this. So we brought in engineering methods and simulation into biology and created Cellworks to simulate cancer pathways and customize treatment for cancer patients. While I was in Cellworks, we kept seeing that Indians are dying by the lakhs due to superbugs. And no big pharmaceutical companies were working on antibiotics, Uday. And the last new antibiotic, as you know better than me, fluoroquinolones in the 1960s, nothing has come since then that is transformational. So came up with this audacious idea saying, if we have the largest problem in the world, big pharmaceutical companies are not interested because scientifically super challenging, economically, too many question marks with antibiotics. Can we actually put together a company from India where our backyard has the worst superbugs, Uday, and create a company? So you can call it naivety, you can call it audacious, but I think it needs a combination of some naivety, being audacious, having passionate, going after a large problem, saying, can we crack it from India? And it's just fortuitous that when that whole thing was coming together, we got it funded by Wellcome Trust to run a simulation on MTB, to take electrical engineering simulation algorithms and simulate TB to come out with new combinations for drug-resistant TB. Who did the wet lab work? AstraZeneca India. And Uday, just as the project was finishing, AstraZeneca India closed. They were one of the best pharmaceutical companies in India doing deep work in infection. Many of them because they spawned off many companies, some sitting in this very call. So it is fortuitous for Bugworks that I put up my hand and said, guys, I can take this talent, a rich set of talents from AstraZeneca. So this electrical engineer plus AstraZeneca came together and that became Bugworks. And I think we have to solve our own problems. I just tired of waiting for this to be solved by the West and then drugs coming to India after an afterthought. People told us you cannot do drug discovery from India. There is no funding, no regulation, no ecosystem, only no. And we still went after it because we have this passion, commitment to make a difference. If 4 to 5 lakh Indians are dying every year, that includes 100,000 babies dying of neonatal sepsis, we have to fix it. So entrepreneurship was driven like that. My last point is, while the science is very interesting, passion to make an impact, business has to be central. So I'm a non-scientist, and I think it's an advantage to have a non-scientist who comes from an entrepreneurship background, hardcore fundraising, networking, ecosystems, that kind of person in the team. So that's our story.
Excellent, Anand. Let me ask you, I mean, a lot of what you all of the entrepreneurs have, the passion that you talked about, and the dream of, changing the world. I mean, everything you just said, right on the money, we all have that. But what made you think that you were going to be successful? I mean, was there ever an iota of doubt saying, if I don't do this by next 1 year, I'm going to get out of here? Was there ever any doubt in your mind?
Yes, there were doubts early, and the doubts mainly came because we did more than 150 presentations today. So whatever little pride I had, I lost, simply because it humbled me so much, right? And and then almost about to give up. And I had, I don't want to sound too personal, but my father was my inspiration. So he was a very famous doctor who passed away in Chennai. And just before he passed away, when I knew he's going to go, he died of a multi-drug resistant infection, Klebsiella. Unbelievable. And then he said to me that, look, if you can crack it, you can save millions of lives that I could never do through my 50-year history.
Yeah.
Don't give. And, call it emotional, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. We said, no, we're going to do this. And even now, I don't know whether we're going to succeed, that a drug will be finally approved and we will make money. But if the journey itself is considered successful, I think we have some early success.
Right. Very inspiring, Anand. I can relate to what a lot of you said. Dr. Reddy got into drug discovery in part because he was heavily diabetic. So we started a program in diabetes. So it resonates with me, like what you just said, here's an unmet need in my family, and I have the potential to be able to resolve. So fantastic story. So I'll come back to you. I see Izzle next on my screen. And Izzle, as the CEO of a startup, I've been there, I'm still there. You have to do everything. And, and I'm saying, you have to make the coffee, you have to clean the table, you have to motivate the employees, you have to scold them, you have to make pitches to different people who you probably never like to meet outside of the pitch room. Pretty much everything, I mean, entrepreneurship is really difficult. It looks very cool from the outside, but being a CEO of a startup is perhaps one of the most difficult jobs that I can imagine. So why did you choose to be CEO? I mean, what is your favorite part of being a CEO? Is it motivating people, or, what is it about being a CEO that made you get into this direction?
Hi, thanks everyone. Thanks for having us on having String on the panel here, and thanks so much for the question. So why CEO, right? So I think, so let's just keep the title aside, because I think CEO is just what everybody can relate to, but I think it's ultimately what is it that you bring to the table, or what I bring to the table. Where we are at String today, right, which is kind of I would say we are in an active business building phase and post the initial kind of technology heavy phase. And one thing that is very clear is, I think what the founder brings to the table is actually the vision. Mm-hmm. And I think that is very critical as the story and as the product market fit of the idea evolves. I think it's very critical to have the founder on board, because that is what will see the idea through the ups and downs of what is needed. Mm-hmm. Right? Because, like you rightly said, I think the skills needed to execute and implement the innovation or bring the product to market at different times is different. Initially when it's purely at a, initial kind of a validation stage, it is technology heavy, R&D heavy. And as you start to go to market, establish product market fit, there's a certain skill required in terms of selling your product, validating your product. And as you start to build and scale the business, then there's a different mindset that's required in terms of branding and growth, right? At each stage, is different skill is required. But I think why it helps to, at least this is my view, and I may realize that I'm wrong, but I think the benefit of having a founder CEO is they are able to evolve the vision and drive the various entities as the business evolves with that vision forward. And I honestly see that as my role here. And like you rightly said, initially there are simple tasks like, making sure that, the office is in order. But I would say that as String has evolved, I as a person have actually evolved vastly. And one thing that I've realized is you become kind of the limiting factor for the company. So unless you grow, the company, I mean, I don't mean to say that it's kind of reality. I'm not saying it to say, okay, I am the core here, but I honestly start to feel like the founder needs to evolve. And the day the founder realizes that maybe I'm not evolving, they need to step out and see if the business can evolve to a much bigger pace outside of them, much larger capacity outside of them. So why CEO particularly for me? I think like what Anand was saying, I really enjoy, I think fundamentally my drive here is I believe that the next couple of decades is going to be the decade finally for biology. Mm-hmm. I think biology can present some very, very interesting solutions that can really solve fundamental problems for us. And having been in the space from, kind of developing tools to developing technologies to now being able to leverage those technologies to bring solutions to market, it's very exciting to see. And I want to see that's kind of the drive for me in terms of being able to do what we're doing today.
Outstanding, Izzul. And I think what you have accomplished during this time is just obviously exemplary. All of you have done exemplary work, but one of the things that I also wanted to follow up and ask you is, what do you do during a downtime? For example, you made a pitch, you are pretty sure you're going to get funding, and it didn't come through. So how do you handle, I mean, we can handle ourselves, but how do you communicate that to the people at the bench? I mean, I take my people out to lunch very frequently, more so than I take my family out. If you guys are listening, okay, just note that down. Take them. So how do you motivate your employees during a downtime?
Yeah, no, I think very, very critical. So at String, the fiber that is there in the team today, and this is something that we strongly believe in, is actually a culture of very open communication. Because as much as we pat ourselves on the good times, I think it helps to be very realistic with the team during the down times as well, right? Because, and that's, I will go back to the vision here, Dr. Uday, is I think it's very, I think the truth is, the reality is what we're trying to do here is hard, right? Yeah. And the probability of success is low, but if we succeed, the rewards are very high. And I think the team that is on board here is vision aligned in terms of saying, okay, if I'm going to work so hard, I want to work on something meaningful. Mm-hmm. So I find that that trust that you build with the team is built on being very open with them on the downtimes as well, right? Because, I think rather than sugarcoat it, they actually appreciate when you're being honest with them and saying, yes, it's a tough financial market. Yes, it's tough to, raise funds for a technology-driven startup from India, but we are on board with the journey and we're moving forward anyway, right? So that's kind of the culture that we've built. So I would say the town halls for us ends up being both tough questions as well as the easy ones.
Just one very quick. How often do you do the town halls? Only during bad times or good times? Or there's a set program that you have?
Yeah. See, at String, we do two things. So monthly once we have kind of an all-team town hall. Mm-hmm. And in between, let's say once a month we have a town hall, and once a month we also do something called tea time. And a town hall for us, which we call as an all-team review or ATR, is a more business-oriented, let's discuss where we are going, kind of an open question format to address any concerns that we have. We also do something called a tea time once a month, which is more on a personal side of things of, not so much, let's keep the business aside and let's just talk to each other as individuals. So I think both the forums help from a communication standpoint internally.
Excellent result for those insights. I'm pretty sure a lot of the startups that are here are taking notes on what Anand said and you said. I think these are things you can't read in a textbook. These have to come out from people who have walked the walk, so these are really good to hear. Shishir, you are next. As I said, I have seen you literally grow beautifully as an entrepreneur. When I first met you, I have to tell you, I could see that there was fire in the belly. It really didn't matter to me what you were trying to sell me. And as part of the BIG review committee, I'm sure you remember those days where you were standing and I was sitting and asking questions. The one thing that came out to me was that you had fire in the belly to be successful. And obviously, you're very successful. Do you think that having a fire in the belly is important, or making money is important? What drives a successful entrepreneur such as yourself? I mean, you are not out there to change the world, right? You said, I'm going to make things that Indian scientists don't have access to. That's how, baby steps, I'm going to change the world. And that was a beautiful story that I heard. And you still owe me lunch, by the way. But can you please tell us what was the thing that really exploded in you to do all that, and you continue to excel at what you're doing? So
yeah, thanks a lot for the opportunity and exciting panel on the board. So see, important thing is to have that fire, and still fire is always there for any entrepreneur. I think the journey of entrepreneur, most of them would be the same: the hunger to do something good, something good to society, something good to your own people. One thing which actually always triggered me and Rachna to start companies, this is the third company which we started and successfully doing good, is that to have to generate employment back to society was the one which always had at the back of mind. I think that's the best way to give back to society, rather giving on charity, rather giving on freebies. So what we always felt is to generate as much employment as possible. That's one thing which is always driving us even today, and keep our necessities to the minimum. That's what we understood of being an entrepreneur. Always our necessities are the lowest priority. In the sense, it's not the priority, but let us keep our necessities minimum so that we are happy in whatever we achieve and progress from there. And luckily, all the employees supported us, and so far we have been associated with most of the employees here. Last 10 years they are with us, 10 to 12 years they are with us, wherever we go. From the RAS previous experience with acquisition, after acquisition they joined us in the pay cut, taking the pay cut and joining back at Huel. So this actually created lots of pressure on us, I mean, indirect pressure on us to build more and more units like this and more people working with us around. So that's actually gave more motivation than anything else to start a company.
Yep, excellent, Shishir. The reason I asked you is very specific. I mentor quite a few companies, and oftentimes my first question is to the CEO or a founder is, why are you doing this? And the typical answers I'll tell you I get are, I hate my job, or I hate my boss. I want to be on my own. That's number one answer that I hear. The other is, I want to make a lot of money, sir. Right now I don't have. I want to make a lot of money, sir. That. And the third, which is the question I was asking Izil, was, I want to be a CEO. I've never been a CEO. I think these people who are CEO look very important. All the wrong reasons. So I mean, how do you handle such people? I'm pretty sure in your company you have people who say, sir, I want to go and start this on my own or whatever. How do you keep them engaged and keep the attrition low? I mean, that is a skill for a startup also, because even for 5,000 rupees, people will change jobs, as you know. So
absolutely, I agree. I think attrition is pretty high, and see, even connecting emotionally also to help to some extent. But see, basically inflation is going up, and catering to the needs of the employee have become tough day by day. It is, though you keep emotions with them and being transparent with them and with considering them as part of your family, but ultimately you have to cater their needs as well at home, because EMIs are growing, there are lots of expenses, very difficult to curtail these attrition rates at some time. But
Right.
I had these issues in couple of times in my life. So people went out, and good part is when I started back again this company, and they came back to me again. So that's what I feel is exits are not to be made tough to the employees. What I feel is that we need to have this, so that they always look back to us and we always look back to them for a longer journey together.
Fantastic. I mean, thank you so much. I mean, very practical advice. And I think something advice that you just said is something that all startups and their CEOs can use. So thank you very much. Arun, very nice meeting you. I have obviously heard a lot about Panduram and you, mostly good, as I said before. One of the questions I have for you is, I mean, if you look at your investors, the people who have invested in your company, I mean, these are who's who of India. These are real, some of them are really big names, household names that are there. So a big challenge that I found in my past, and as well, not as much now, but in the past, was managing heavyweight investors who are on the board, right? Because obviously they're very successful people, and they have their own view of how things need to go, and they relate to their own successes and say, this is how it worked for me. How do you handle managing a board? Is a very big critical function of a CEO, I believe. And without, as Azul said, you can lie to them, but you also need to make sure that they're engaged. So how are you able to do this? Because uh, I don't see any gray hair on you. So how are you doing it? How are you managing these heavy ticket people?
So thanks, Dr. Uday, and thanks again to FABA for this opportunity. Wonderful panel, great discussion. So I think I'm getting the toughest one here. So the thing is, the initial first 5 years of Pandorum actually was purely supported by the DBT, that's the government of India, right? So during that time, it was purely based on research grants and say things like that. So that time it was more of a research oriented company, and as you rightly said, as investors start coming into the company, it becomes much more formal actually. So in terms of Pandorum, like we have been actually lucky to have some of the people like Sachin Bansal, Vinny Bansal from Flipkart, Mr. Sunil Munjal from Hero, and the Indian Angel Network actually. And Kotak, Kitman, and some of these investors, right? So who have been there with us for almost now 3-4 years actually. So the thing is, how we see this perspective is important here actually. So everyone, as you said, have has been extremely successful in their own fields actually, and they are deeply committed, or they have a huge amount of trust for this entity actually, that this is doing a good R&D and the output is actually relevant to the society, because right, blindness is kind of a big issue actually. So the motivation of these investors is kind of different, if you say, when they look at a company like Pandorum. It is not the way probably they would look at aggregation company or e-commerce company or something else actually, which is driven by certain different indicators. Yep. In our case, actually, it's mainly driven by the kind of quality of R&D we do, and then the kind of asset building that is phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, say clinical studies, etc. So there is no revenue which is going to come before any of these events. So
exactly.
Yep. The understanding what they have about this company is much more different and probably much more mature than I would say a lot of VCs around in this space. Because a company like Pandorum or probably String and Anand's company, all these require such people, to support them in the longer term, because as you know, these will not produce any revenue before 5 years, 7 years. We are actually 10 years now down the line, right? So 5 years with the investors' money, and the pressure probably what would come from hardcore VCs, financial investors, would be much different than these actually. And these people have been much more, in fact, helpful in driving certain things, because they also know that it's a kind of a slow business. It's not like a fast moving business, right? Like, because you cannot accelerate animal studies. Like, you'll have to do the same 3-month studies, 6-month studies and things like that. So they see a very good macro picture. So the kind of interventions at a micro level is minimal. At a macro level, it is kind of, I would say, beneficial.
So, I mean, it sounds like you have a dream board. I wish, that's great. But let me do a little bit of a role playing. What if one of them got up and said, Arun, I don't think you should be spending this $3 million on that study. I don't want you to do that. How would you then, I mean, obviously you can't offend them and say, can you please keep quiet? I know what I'm doing. But how do you handle that situation?
Yeah, that's kind of interesting, because the direction or the overall, way in which the company is moving in terms of the studies and things like that, they have to be very, cogently decided actually, because these are pretty expensive studies. Once you start a study, it'll cost maybe $500,000, $1 million kind of thing.
Right.
And someone might have a different perspective that why are you doing these studies now? Here in India, probably should have done these studies in the US, or why are you doing it in the US? Why can't you do it in India? Or why are you doing, say, for example, this particular disease indication and things like that. So there are debates. There are, of course, inputs what we get actually, that which direction is better and things like that. And in this sense, actually, we have a pretty eminent scientific advisory, board actually. So
I'm well aware of one of them, yes, who's a good friend of mine. Yes, Ajit. Ajit is there, right? So.
Of course, so they are actually industry veterans, right? Industry veterans and practicing clinicians actually. So these are discussed with them, and very extensively in depth and things like that. And then the things are actually presented to the investors, or the key people in the system actually, and that's how the decisions are made. Say, for example, one of the examples I can give is when, say, COVID hit actually. There was a lot of uncertainty around in the air, right? So some of the studies what we were doing kind of went on to a roadblock. We were working on pursuing the cornea pipeline actually into the human studies and things like that. A lot of supply chain issues came, and it all got hung up actually. We had to use our platform technology and then kind of pivot to COVID or lung induced ARDS lung related this thing indication actually. So that's when we kind of gathered everyone around, and then got a consensus, and then did some of the studies in that direction. And then at the end of the day, it proved beneficial, because we could show that we are not ophthalmology company, right? It's not we are making corneas, or we are working in the R&D of corneas. It's a platform technology. We can work on multiple tissues and things like that. So it was a very kind of a democratic decision, I would say.
Right. So sounds like you like to build consensus using all the expertise that you have around you, and then construct an argument in why you should be doing that. Sounds like it's consensus building. You rely a lot on consensus building from people, experienced people. Is that about right? Yeah.
That's absolutely true, because this kind of field, as we go on moving it, the field also moves, and as Ariel rightly said, right, the founders also have to evolve. So how do founders evolve? Like obviously we can take some courses, do some YouTube videos and stuff like that, but obviously we need experts whom we can rely on actually, who have had 30 years, 50 years of experience in their own fields, and then kind of guide us actually. So that's very important to get a consensus among experts and then drive it.
Okay. Excellent. By the way, I want to put a plug in for what I do. I do 3D bioprinting of vascularized human lungs. So if you ever feel the need for that, be happy to, showcase that technology to you. So Thank you so much. Very good insights, and I'm sure what I'd like to do is at 6 o'clock open it up to the audience because I'm pretty sure they're dying. But so we have about 10 minutes, maybe one last round of not questions, but Anand, is there one thing you feel that you should have done differently? I'm sure not all decisions you made where the right turned out to be right. Was there one, and then how did you handle that? And I'll ask the same questions to everybody. Yeah.
Great question. We all have skeletons in our cupboards. Let me just answer it in two parts. From a structure perspective, because there are many startup companies in here, Uday. We started US operation separately from the Indian operation, and then we also have an Australian footprint. So I think it's very important to have a globalized view because most of the problems we are solving are global. Talent is global. Funding pools are global. Grants are global. So the one or two things that I would really request people to do very early on as they plan thing is tap into global grants as soon as possible. DBT is only a seeding grant. They are not meant to make your company survive. So the day you get the company going, the CEO, COO, whoever has very strong grant capabilities, global grants we need to tap in sooner than later. The number two thing, second and last point, Uday, is that maybe me as a founder should have moved to the United States. Although we structured the US company in Delaware owning Bangalore, and this is a US entity holding the IP, not having the key drivers of the company, the CSO, the CTO, CEO in the US, made it very difficult to raise funding. So we lost out on the fact that we are a US company, but still had to go and beg the whole world to raise funding. So with all due respect to India, with all due respect to the outstanding ecosystem that we have here today, compared to 10 years ago, if you're going to do a drug discovery or a gene therapy or a cell therapy company, it's a 12 to 14 years. Please think about global presence and having at least one or two of the management committee members there. And you asked a follow-on question. How do we? Things basically, we go around the world. So we have funders from Japan, from South Africa, from UK, United States government, etc. It's a tough job. So my full-time job is a chief begging officer to go around the world and beg funds. So please think through the funding as much as you think about IP and you think about your gene and protein. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent, Anand. I by the way, I strongly, we have a partnership with a US-based company, and I tell people we have already ahead of 99.9% of Indian companies because of that one connection that we have. I believe in that, truly believe. I mean, just look at the math, right? 50% of the revenue in any pharma product is based out of US, right? I mean, so right off the bat, it tells you that having some element of presence in the US as early as you can is very important. So, and I think
Uday, sorry, just because a lot of people ask me this question, right? This doesn't mean I'm not nationalist, I'm not patriotic. Totally. Don't confuse that from the practicality and the pragmatism required to keep a biotech company afloat.
Totally. Excellent, Anand. Thank you. Isil, same. Is there one mistake you think you may have made? And if so, how did you correct it? Or what would you do to correct it? So.
Sure. There's quite a few, but I'll probably start with a couple.
Sure.
So I think one of the things I would highlight is, I think for the first 4 or 5 years of our existence, we didn't brand communicate our story very well. In fact, we were found by partners from outside. And when they found us, they were like, oh my God, you guys are doing this great work here, but you should be talking more about yourselves. So I wish we had done that earlier, sooner, because you also realize, for the kind of innovation that you want to do, right? You're making big jumps. I think it's very critical to communicate, educate, evolve the ecosystem as well, along with you. And I think that is something that we needed to do. Fortunately for us, given the work that we're doing in climate impact and sustainability, with the pandemic, there's actually been huge tailwinds, right? And globally, people are talking about decarbonization and climate impact. And so that's really helped us. But we were doing this work 8 years back, right? And at that time, we didn't spend sufficient time talking about what difference we could make. I think I wish we had done that sooner. That would be one. The second, I think, lessons learned largely from fundraising is that we could have done a better job of doing, kind of a product market fit for the kind of funds that we reached out to. Like I think Anand said, we also spoke to, I think, hundreds of investors. I probably would have talked to every single investor in the Indian ecosystem today. And it took us a while to realize that for some investors, no matter how much I try to optimize my story, it's just not a fit, because it just doesn't fit their investment ethos. Because I don't mean to put down VCs in any way, but at the end of the day, they are fund managers. They're managing funds and they have a formula. And if you don't fit their formula, no matter how exciting your technology is, and if you're solving, climate change or cancer, it doesn't make a difference for them, right? Because it doesn't fit their formula. Yep. So now, after having gone through 3 rounds of fundraise, I would say we cater our pitch to the right funder and see if that, the product market fit there is very critical as well. Because, talking about CEO, what is really limiting is your time and your bandwidth. Right. So if you can gain efficiencies in terms of fundraise also, I think that is a big win. So that is something that I think I would do, definitely do a lot better next time around.
Excellent. So just very quickly then, do you look at the portfolio of the VC and say, I think this might be the guy for us, or how do you know who's the right fit?
So I think it is about talking to the decision maker at the fund. So rather than, go through your analyst, your associate, and go through the IC and the partner, I think you have to just talk to the partner and see if this is something that the fund, it even fits their funds, right? Okay. Because rather than go through this analyst and then take 2 weeks, talk to them and go through the cycle, if you can get even 10 minutes with the partner, you get an immediate feel if their risk appetite meets your risk profile. Yep. And if that's not a fit, you can do any kind of song and dance. It's not going anywhere.
Right, right. Thank you very much. Outstanding. Yeah. Shishir, I have the same question for you. Was there one mistake you made, and what was it, and then how did you correct it, please?
Yeah, the first mistake is the losing out your majority, what I have done in my first venture to an MNC that actually, and I'm not from a background. I think Indian technopreneurs or technocrats are not trained in the business aspects. Right. I'm not trained in the business aspects as such. Not even, today I do understand the business well. I think that's a big learning for me what not to do, because the first, to the techno or naive guys in the business, probably the first venture would teach you like first child in your family, So they teach you how to be a second child well. So that's how what all things not to be done is very clear from my earlier venture. So I keep correcting myself, and I said again, the technocrats are not good at projecting themselves. Actually, we are not good at projecting what exactly, and we probably would have hired some specialists in making presentations or specialists in projections, and probably haven't done that. We ourselves did every place, and that's the reason I think technocrats do fail.
Yeah. I 100% agree with you. There's also a comfort zone that us as technocrats are very comfortable. As long as you're talking about gene therapy, I'm a star. But I have no clue what you're asking me when you say, do I want dilutive capital or non-dilutive? You kind of phase out at that time. So I totally agree with you that transition, either by yourself or hiring somebody else who has that skill, I think can make or break the company. So complete agreement with your experience, actually. Yeah. Arun, I have the very same. Have you made any mistakes? And if so, what did you do for course correction?
So, one example probably would be that, in the very initial days, when we were, students and entrepreneurs put together, actually, we used to be overtly technical. In the sense, we used to say that, somebody asks us, what are you working on? we'll say that we're working on, three-dimensional hydrogels with the photoprocess-linkable tyrosine side chains and peptides, which can encapsulate mesenchymal stem cells, something, of that sort, right? So people will not understand it, only say some people in, the DBT and some people, who had IIT single-digit ranks, they could understand these things, right? So later on, slowly we realized that, we should talk much more, say, investor friendly in that sense, which is probably, we are working on corneal blindness, we are working on tissue engineering, regenerative medicine and things like that. So that's one thing which we learned. Second thing is actually, that we're still learning actually. In fact, this kind of raise money when you have money, right? So once you see attraction, you should actually kind of start accumulating capital, because capital is required, and most founders actually who come from technical background, they underestimate the requirement of capital actually. They think that, okay, it's a science experiment, I can do it in 50 lakhs, like a big grant, right? But it could require probably 20-30 crores. So you need to have that kind of outlook, and you should raise capital much earlier.
But not worry about dilution then? I mean, so the question of if you raise too much, then you're giving up a piece of the company more than you should, because the evaluation at that period of time is. So how do you make that balance then?
True, that's true actually. See, what I have actually, at least personally learned is that these valuations, and particularly the equity, really doesn't matter at the end of the day. Because as long as you are a founder or co-founder and you're driving the system towards certain goals, and you're driving the system as a whole organism, it's it really doesn't matter. It really depends on who the other people in the company are actually. Do you treat them like your family or not, right? So if that's the case, then it really doesn't matter actually. So I really don't know how much exact number I own in the company. So that's how it is.
Okay. Yeah, whatever you think makes the company move forward, that drives your decision, rather than saying I own 10% now, I'll go down to 4%. Sounds like so. Very good. I think a big hand to all the rock stars. And I knew Anand and Shishir were rock stars, but I found two new rock stars today in Izil and Arun, and I'd like to meet with you. Hopefully, I know you're both in Bangalore. If I ever come to Bangalore, I'd love to connect with you and hear more about what's going on and learn more. Actually, I have a lot to learn. So, Jagdish, is it okay if we open up the floor for some questions? They can people can either raise hands or chat. Sorry?
I thought there's a breakout room. Are we supposed to?
I know that. But
10 minute में हो जाएगा.
Okay, I'm just thinking that we take the questions here, because then everybody, if somebody asks you a question, everybody else would be. So is it okay if we do that, Jagdish? Jagdish Garu, do we have your permission? Yeah.
Sure, Uday. I mean, whatever. So if somebody wants to have a special session, so we created 4 Zoom events with 4 of the entrepreneurs. So if somebody wants to have a special session with them, or otherwise, feel free to ask here so that everybody gets enlightened with your questions.
Let's do this. Let's do 15 minutes of Q&A here, and then you can go into a breakout session.
Sure, then.
Ajit,
that's correct. Yeah. No, that's fine. I don't have questions. I was clarifying. Thank you.
Yes. She spoke like a kid, but she has enough experience.
I'll mute somebody.
Yeah, you need to mute somebody.
Okay.
But I see we have a lot of participants. This is your time, guys, to be able to ask a question to people who have navigated, the tough road that you and I have ahead of us. So please, feel free to ask questions. Maybe Ajit can get started with a question. Yeah, there is one question from, I will read it out, and then, sorry. I'm not very tech savvy, and I don't know where the pop out went.
I can read it, Uday.
Yeah, please read it out. Yeah,
what is the difference between angel investor and venture capitalist?
Oh, okay. Anand, since you're on the top on the screen, can you take that one, please?
Yeah, this is a common question from most startup companies. So when you go to raise money from friends, family, or somebody from the biotech ecosystem who's an entrepreneur who's willing to write the first $50,000 or $100,000 check. That's called an angel investor. Basically, they don't have the full institutional backing to go through very complex discussions on valuations, etc. So it's people typically known to you or who are very fond of the space that you're working in, etc. So not very organized, but they are very passionate about biotech, friends, families, ecosystem, iconic names in the biotech industry who don't mind writing their first $50,000 or $100,000. They're angels because they come to your rescue and they usually don't beat you down on valuation. Not always, but you can get beaten down. But in general, they don't beat you down on valuation because they want to be part of your play. That's angels. And then typically when you move to a series A round or a series pre-series A round, typically you bring in an institution who goes through 5-6 months of discussion, background checking, IP checking, valuation discussions, full due diligence on your company. That is an institution. Angel rarely does due diligence.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. Uday, can
yeah, please go ahead. And after you,
okay.
There's a question posted as well. So.
Okay. Yeah, this question is for Anand, and then Azil, perhaps you can also answer. I understand, Anand, drug discovery, 8 years, 10 years, 15 years, a lot of money is required and very high risk, maybe 2%, 5% conversion into a product before it becomes a commercially success. Okay. But there, I think, most of the funding will come from the US and Europe and Japan and other places that you mentioned, which is very much true. And they have a better risk appetite than what's there in India. Okay. But can you give examples as to how it can be done in India for others, perhaps, short type of project? I think Azil, has done that very valuable product, but, it can move much faster if it is in India. And if people don't want to go outside for raising funds and all, can you give some advice, Azil and Anand, for the
let Edil respond first and then come in second. Please, Edil.
Sure.
Sure. So, no, I think, while we're talking about raising funds globally, there is a big advantage for innovation capital in India, right? Because that first 1 million that you raise actually can go much further along in an Indian ecosystem than in a Silicon Valley ecosystem. Right? So actually today it does help to have a huge presence for that early innovation phase in India. And for raising funds for that innovation phase, right? I think that like Anand pointed out, grants is a big source of funding for that initial phase. And DBT, I think, has got a number of initiatives there. We should also look globally for similar kind of grants. I would say that today, what has happened in the last, I would say, just 5 years is that there are a lot more VCs in the Indian ecosystem who are opening up to put down that first initial checks. So actually today, if you want to raise a 1 to 5 million in India, you do have VCs that are willing to come in that phase. Of course, the question remains as to what is the kind of valuation and control that they are willing to work on, right? Because I think that difference is definitely there in the Indian ecosystem versus the US. But I think that's definitely changed today. There is a lacuna for the next phase of growth. So if you want to look, if you're raising anywhere from a 5 to 30 or 40, there you don't have as many funds. But in the initial phase, definitely in the Indian ecosystem today, I think between grants and VCs and angels, there's definitely folks that are willing to fund biotech, high risk, long gestation period work as well.
To add on to what Edil said, great. I mean, Edil has given a great synopsis. Ajit, Uday, what has changed in the last couple of years? This is my 5th startup. And what I find has changed is impact investors are now trying to hunt in India. It's a new category of investors called impact investors, Europe-based, Japan-based, Norway-based, etc., who are not looking for 5x, 10x, 20x. Their narrative is not like Sand Hill Road VC or New York investors, right? We got invested by Lightrock, who are a fully owned subsidiary of Wittgenstein Global Trust. They've never done drug discovery, but they found AMR, immuno-oncology that we're working on as areas of importance to low and medium income countries who otherwise always are, really nobody cares about these areas initially. So to everyone here, apart from the grants, write grants like there's no tomorrow. Go hit Bill and Melinda Gates, Wellcome Trust, Rockefeller, XYZ, Howard Hughes, whatever. Second thing is tap into impact investors all over the world. Cold call, write to them. I'm solving this problem with this thing. That's the new wave that is coming. And the other new wave, Ajit, that's coming in for drug discoveries, Japanese investors. And with all humility, I can say we brought the Japanese investors to India via UTech, University of Tokyo Edge Capital. So they don't have enough innovation going on in their country in biotech as compared to us. So new influx of money from investors like Japan, new impact investors who are looking at ESG, environment, social, governance type of projects. These are new avenues opening for the entrepreneurs here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Anand.
Yeah, excellent.
Thank you.
I actually see a bunch of questions, and my eyesight is good enough to read those, Jagdish. So thank you. I think this question is very appropriate for Arun. Arun, the question is from Dr. Suresh Kalangi, and it says, as drug discovery is a long journey, what was in your mind when you started the journey to out-license molecule to a launch on your, or do a launch on your own? What do you suggest for upcoming startups? So, monetization, I mean, how do you handle that, I guess, yeah.
Thanks. That's a kind of good question, because many researchers who work in the space of drug discovery development, they actually work in a segment of that. They don't do the whole process themselves, right? So they don't have that overall feel of what's the length of the thing and what's required actually. Somebody say comes from a computational background, then he starts a company on this thing. So in that sense, our model actually in that this thing has been that we will focus on the innovation, we'll focus on the R&D, we'll focus on getting the IPs and things sorted around that, and then kind of de-risk the asset till a particular stage. That's like phase 1/2, some of those clinical stage, and then prove its safety and some sort of efficacy in humans, and then try to kind of out-license it to a big pharma who can probably do better justice to that than us. So our we from our initial thing, we know that our what our strength lies in the core innovation. So we'll stick with that actually. And that's probably what many of the biotech companies in this drug discovery development space do. They take it from the value, along the value line, they will take a molecule or a bunch of molecules from point A to point B, and then hand it over to somebody. So there are very few companies, including big pharma companies, who will do everything from 0 to 1. So it's like they all kind of work out collaboratively in licensing or licensing. For many boutique startups, this acquisition model after the asset has reached a clinical stage has been there for now quite some time.
Excellent. There's actually quite a few, but I'll limit myself to 3 more questions and then we'll stop. Actually, this is very appropriate. Shishir, I think I would like you to please answer. How has post-pandemic science changed in biotech, health, tech ecosystem for India startups and at a global level? How has COVID really impacted the startup ecosystem, you think?
Yeah, I think this is another important question, because COVID, those who have created value chain during the COVID period haven't attracted investors much, because everybody would look as isolation case where there's a COVID and every revenue got through is only through COVID. So people are focusing on post-COVID, what is to be done. But basically, based on the COVID impact, localization in the sense manufacturing locally, making Atmanirbhar Bharat like stuff have been created lots of impact to develop the local products. In the sense, even the global companies are thinking of manufacturing locally. So many of the manufacturers who set up for a single product, say only for COVID, or maybe a drug, maybe a diagnostic. So they have lots of opportunities coming up on working on manufacturing, on OEM manufacturing setups to be utilized for them and making it global product on the local ecosystem. So I think lots of opportunities are coming up for startups to create, for example, if they have a single product in there, KIIT probably can have a manufacturing line for a global brand. So in India, so that's actually picking up quite a bit. And COVID is still active at many of the places. So it's not that only COVID is not active in India, but in Dubai, or if you talk other areas also, it's pretty active. So it is even that is encouraging the global manufacturers to focus on India to manufacture locally.
Totally. Excellent. Thank you. I'll just take two more questions and then we'll stop because we need to then have the breakout session. I'll ask one question to Anand because it's specifically targeted to him, and then one more for Isel. Anand, the question is, I am the founder of a startup that is developing unique and innovative solutions in tissue regeneration. Could you please elaborate on how a subsidiary in the US must be structured?
It's a full discussion. I hope in the breakout, this person can come to the breakout. But in a nutshell, Uday, what happens is you have to be very careful about how you structure the India versus US, because the moment US acquires India, you can't write for any more DBT grants. So it's a very, very careful thing of keep the Indian thing going, develop IP, and try to tap into as many grant pools in India as possible. Only when the cut over happens can you afford to become a subsidiary of the US entity. And the timing actually works out fine because you really need the US entity when you're going out for pre-series A or series A, like Edil said. In our time, it was pre-series. Now pre-series is happening in India, as Edil said. Now it's moving up. We only need to tap US money for series A. So just be very careful. And you need a person to advise you on intellectual property. It's not as easy as saying, I can just assign the IP property. There are transfer pricing consequences. Be very careful and go with the professional who can do the structuring to make sure that you don't have an issue with SEBI or an issue with DBT grants structures. That will be my short answer.
Excellent. Thank you. One last question for I think I've been pronouncing your name wrong, Isel. I believe it's Edil, but I completely apologize. Yeah. One more reason I need to come and meet you in Bangalore.
Of course.
So this is the last question. And I think, is investing and developing a new molecule for anti-COVID drug in preclinical stage at this stage is a good value proposition or not? So really, is COVID gone out of flavor or out of fashion or not? So.
I think I'm going to actually pass on the question to Anand. I'm actually not the right person to address that question. We are in a completely different space. So Anand or Arun want to take a stab at it. Yeah.
Sure. I'm normally not dismissive, Uday, but I want to let this young lady or young man know that you'll be making a big mistake if you get into COVID. More than 163 assets are going through various stages of clinical pipeline, old drugs repurposed, completely new molecular entities, antifungals being looked at, antivirals, and it's going to be tough. Unless you're one of the big players who can dovetail off a vaccine story.
Yes.
Just a standalone small company doing pre-molecular and having to go through another 6-7 years. I'm afraid if you came to me for advice, I would tell them to look elsewhere. There are other good antiviral areas, broad spectrum antivirals, RNA viruses, but for COVID, not a good idea.
Very, very diplomatically said, Anand. Thank you for being a straight shooter. Shishir or Arun, would you like to add to that? And then we'll wrap up and go to the breakout.
I add a little bit. Probably drug repurposing has been a common feature. Probably look at some more cheminformatics and see that if this drug fits into some other antiviral or maybe a broad spectrum antiviral, rather closing down your preclinical stuff, probably look at different indications of different antiviral.
Great. Yeah, excellent advice. Yeah, Arun, please.
Yeah, so I just generally wanted to add that this is a good time to be in life sciences, biotech, ecosystem in India actually, because we have seen this ecosystem, and the other panelists also, we have seen each other for I think a decade now. So the system has matured a lot. In the early days, actually, there was just BIRAC, which was supporting organizations. Now you can see n number of incubators, n number of funders, VCs coming forward, angels from different walks of life coming forward to support this sector actually. So this is actually kind of a golden time for early stage startups. For mid stage and late stage, obviously it's still a grind, but it's evolving actually. And this is all, I would say, primarily because of some of the very early institutions in this area, like DBT, which has been very, very active over 10 years, and some of the organizations like IKP, which has been there for a very long time, right? So these kind of systems have been possible because of these kind of interactions and organizations like FABA, which is kind of bringing all these startups together. So this is great, and great to be part of this. Thank you.
Excellent. Yep. Well, thank you to all the 4 rock stars. Really appreciate your insights and your comments. And I think the half of the mini MBA actually came out of this session, by the way. So really well done. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Uday. Thank you, Uday.
You're welcome. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. So Jagdish, should we now direct the audience to the breakout groups?
So, I mean, we can ask audience who would like to talk to whom, because we created 4 Zoom links. I mean, Ajil, Anand, Arun, and Shishir. So you should have got your own separate links. If not,
this is on an email, or right here I see a breakout room in the bottom.
no,
right?
these are not the breakouts. Like if you go to the main event page, your sessions are there. Only you can start. Just see. I mean, or otherwise we can also open the mics here, and people would like to talk to. So instead of creating one more Zoom hassle, because after running this event, I would like to really minimize technical difficulties. So let's keep it here. If somebody wants to talk, feel free to open the mic and talk here. Or otherwise, if you want the breakout, I can create here only breakout and then send you to the different breakout.
Wonderful.
Why don't we do this? We do stop at 6:30, sharp, which is about 9 questions here. One question that there are quite a few, but I missed is, and I think this is relevant to all of you. How do you approach pharma companies for partnerships? I mean, is there a strategy, or you just cold call, or would you all of you like to take that, or please?
I could give you our experience.
Yes.
Every product is different. Every indication, therapeutic area, Uday, is very, very different. But in general, people here, when they work on early stage drug discovery, they think they can go to pharma companies. Typically, that's not the stage. Today, the rule of thumb in the world is there's at least an expectation that phase 1 trials will be done, so the de-risking is done. Pharma is very strong in clinical development today, as you know very well. Phase 2, phase 3, registration, and market. They'd like to have a de-risked asset. So phase 1 would be an ideal time. If you go preclinical, then you get 1/11th your value. The difference between a preclinical asset and a phase 1 asset is 11x. That's the industry average. So if you get 11 million here, you get 1 million here, right? So you're giving up too much too quickly if you are early in the thing. But then if you're out of money, and then there is a pharma company out there to say that we can take over the clinical development, then you take a very tactical survival call at that point in time. No easy blueprint cookie cutter answer, but if you're doing drug discovery, try your best to push at least till GLP talks in preclinical. That's the first valuation that you will get from pharma. Anything before that, they will put all the money as bio dollars. You'll get $100 million deal with 200K upfront, and the rest of the money
back-ended.
Back-ended. It's called bio dollars. So don't. PR announcements mean nothing. Be careful before you give it up. And like Shishir said, right? Somebody comes and takes major ownership of your company or your asset. It sounds great in a PR announcement, but it can be devastating because there can be headwinds that you have to deal with. So long and short, at least hit GLP talks. Sweet spot would be phase 1, in my humble opinion.
Yeah. Completely agree. There's actually quite a few other questions that have popped up, but Ajit, please go ahead.
Yeah. Just to add to what Anand made the comment, but in the meanwhile, try to keep that relationship with various pharmas warm. Keep them informed, but keep them interested, keep them engaged, but don't give a molecule.
Yes,
at early stage.
Jagdish, I see you've posted a question. Would you like to read it, please?
Sure. It's actually from Visu. So the question says, like, most scientists find it tough finding a co-founder from field different from than their own field, either it could be business, regulatory, or engineering. So can you share some nuggets on it in co-founder search? How do you find another partner in life?
Wait for my fellow
I
panel.
think we can hear from all of them. Yeah, please, Azul, go ahead. By the way, do you have co-founders in String or yeah?
We do.
Okay.
This is actually there's no easy answer or one single answer, I think, to this question. It's very much, I think a unique solution in each case, I would say. In the case of String, my co-founder is Vinod, who is from a completely different sector, who also is my husband. So when we started this, I was focusing on a lot of the technology development work. And when we started getting more into business and strategy, kind of convinced Vinod to come on board into a very different sector, right? Because, at that time he was doing more hardware, server hardwares across Asia Pacific, managing Juniper networks across Asia Pacific. So a very, very different industry. But I think Anand highlighted this. It helps a lot to have non-scientific co-founders, actually, because they really keep the science online, is what I feel. Because sometimes as scientists, we tend to say, oh, it just takes too long. Yes. But that's not a good enough answer, because time is money. So I think having the non-scientific executive team really helps. But how you will find it, actually, I think it's very, very personal for each, because it needs to be a relationship of trust, a relationship where you can really butt heads and still walk away without losing anything in the relationship. So I think it's a case-by-case basis, unfortunately.
Shishir, I see a smile on your face. Sounds like you also have your own opinions.
Yeah, see, essentially what I feel is if you two technocrats, you while doing business together, you understand each other well. Excuse me. So you need to part your ways in between. So you understand who is good at science and who is good at talking. So that's what we did together, myself and my wife, being both in the same technocrat side. So we decided that somebody would do the science part and other do the administration part. So that's equally important in building up the relation externally. So internal relations are taken care by science and externally by doing the talking like what I'm doing now. So that's what I feel you need to understand. And other way is probably you need to build up good relations with the employees. And if you find somebody suitable in the long run, maybe convert them into a suitable partner later.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So guys, those of you who are not married, there's another item on your checklist now. Okay. So make sure you check that box too. Jagdish, maybe we should close at 6:30, but go ahead, please.
Sure. No, I was thinking maybe this like instead of chatting, like writing a message, please open the mics and talk, because I see very interesting questions like from Jagan. He said like when you are managing. Yeah, Anand, you want to go ahead? Please do.
Yeah. I saw Jagan's question very quickly to jump in. Uday, yours as well as Jagan's questions has come. I feel that when you're putting teams together, please try to have a dreamer and an executor and a networking person. That's a DE and DEN, right? The dreamer and execution person can be scientists, but the networking person who's outward focused, extroverted into funding, has no shame, very thick skin, needs to be a non-scientist. So it'd be nice to have a DEN combination coming in there.
That's nice.
The gentleman who was asked the question is, to Arun's point, the ecosystem today is fantastic compared to 10 years ago. We have to thank DBT. We have to thank state governments. I think there are 24 incubators, accelerators in our country. I'm in C-Camp, but there is BBC, there's IKP, there's unbelievable amount of
INS. Yep.
Exactly. So the question that came from the gentleman is, where do we go and find even investor lists? Edil, myself, Arun, Shishir, we struggled calling, just doing cold calls, talking, creating our own ecosystem. Now you go to these accelerators and incubators, you go to BIRAC, there is a list of investors. You come and talk to people who have raised money and have a lot of wounds on our skin. That's enough of an ecosystem. I want the entrepreneurs here to know that you are not alone. There is actually a relatively matured ecosystem for early stage capital. So don't despair.
And one
Jagdish,
thing to add to that, one thing to what Anand was saying is, I think if you look at a lot of the VCs today, they are starting a deep tech investment arm internally. And I think that's a very, very welcome change in the ecosystem. Still relatively risk averse, but a change nevertheless. So I think that's something that we should definitely look at. In fact, one of our very early investors, Ankur Capital, they started, they're very much interested in the symbio space, in the biotech space, and they do startup pitch fest as well, which was not the case even like 3-4 years back.
There you go.
Excellent. Jagdish, what I suggest is let's not take our rock stars' time for granted. I think we should stop here and thank them. Is that okay, Jagdish?
For me, I love I'm enjoying the conversation. It's up to them. If they would like to stay, please hang in there. If not, really
well, you put them under a spot now. I mean, I don't see any of them saying no. I have to
No,
go.
actually, we scheduled like 1 hour Zoom call after your thing. So
Okay.
I just feel that it's a part of the agenda. I mean, if not the case, I'm okay with it.
Are there more questions, Jagdish? Are there more questions?
There are a couple of questions, Anand.
I do see more. Yeah. Why don't we finish the ones that are out there and then call it
Sure.
quits?
There's one from
Actually, Dr. Jagdish and Dr. Uday and rest, I'm going to excuse myself and just log off.
Yes.
Got another
Please,
event to
feel
run for
free,
this
Jim.
time.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thanks for it was
Absolutely.
great to be on the panel with all the other
Thank
rock
you.
stars. Thanks so much.
Yeah. See you in Bangalore.
See you soon.
Thank
Sure.
you very
Bye.
much,
Thank
Ajal.
you.
Bye.
Yeah.
So
All right. Let's do the last couple of questions.
okay, there was one from RX Propellant. I'm not just trying
John?
to... Guys, please open the mics and speak. We are not in a confined area, so there's
By
no
the
need-
way,
You can't ask us
panelists-
questions here. You can't go to a VC. I promise you. So open it.
100% true.
Yeah.
100% true.
So the question
I
goes.
have a question.
Yes, please.
I have a
Please,
question.
Mandar, yes.
I'm Gopal Pandey. And
Oh, sorry.
you mentioned about impact investors. I only wanted to have a list of those, the Japanese or the US ones or wherever.
Right. So one way of doing is, sure, you can talk to FABA. You can talk to. Are you connected to an accelerator?
No, I'm not. I'm on my own.
You're on your own. Okay. So maybe you could talk, Jagdish. I mean, I would be happy to.
I sent a message to him.
Gopal.
I sent a message to him.
Okay,
Maybe you can give a list. He can email it to me.
I think Redana sir will be perfect to tell you, Gopal sir.
Gopal, there's no free lunch and there's no easy thing that there's a list
I
here.
agree with that. I only need the list. I only need the list on names and nothing more. No promises.
No,
Okay.
I'm saying there'll be 1 or 2 names will be given, and then from there you can work your way.
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay.
I've been doing it. I contacted Ankur, by the way, but that's a different zone. So I've gone through the BIRAC list, but I need what you talked about and what Hazel mentioned about 1 to 5 million zone.
Okay.
Yeah. So Jagdish, please
can-
connect Gopal, or the gentleman asking the question. We'll try to help offline. Yeah.
Sure.
So Dr. Gopal, I think Dr. Ajit is in Bangalore, and you could always take his help.
Yes.
Sure enough.
Yeah. Meet
Thank
him.
you very much. Yeah.
He's a very good mentor.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Jagdish, any more you have to
Yes.
read out? And
Yes,
let's
Uday.
just be the last one.
Yeah.
Before they politely all excuse themselves.
When starting your pharma biotech company, what are the main pain points of the companies? Is it infrastructure or time factor, or flexibility to accommodate different operations, or anything else? Abhishekar from RX Propellant.
I think this all of you should answer at least very quickly.
I'll let my esteemed panelists, co-panelists answer it, and then I'll come to it.
And then you should too. Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah, Arun, you look like you're ready to go. Yeah.
Great. Pain point, if you ask, it's almost like acupuncture, right? So there are a number of pain points. So I didn't know that actually, I was going into, the direction of a pharma company. I thought, when we started the company way back in 2010, it was kind of more of a different vision because it was more immature at the point of time. So the kind of pain points that you experience in the early stages, they are completely different. The pain points that you experience during the say early on fundraising stages, they are completely different. That's like explaining to various investors that what's your business model and how is it going to make some kind of returns to them or some kind of impact to society and all. So you need to have those things addressed. Then comes the stage wherein you need to really address the regulatory issues. That's when you start talking about preclinical studies. You start talking about GLP, CGMP, and these kind of terminologies start coming into play. And then you need to have the capital for using all those things. So the pain points are many, but they are not new actually. In the sense, none of these pain points are new. So all these pain points are there for even the big pharma companies, small companies. It's all fine actually. And over the past decade or so, or something of that sort, the regulatory agencies across the world have improved a lot. In India, the DCGI has improved probably tenfold actually. The interaction is much more streamlined now. It is online. You get a much more structured response from them and things like that. FDA is like super streamlined. So these things are also improving. So the pain points are kind of going away, but it's good to have mentors, or it's good to have advisors who have walked the path, and kind of addressed or kind of avoided these pain points. So yeah, that would be
okay. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Shishir, and then Anand, I guess. So.
Yeah, I think the first pain point is to understand which sector you want to work on, because it all depends on pharma, biopharma or biotech side. It's all, you see the regulations, you see which would probably give you the better revenues and with less regulatory hassles first, and then probably can pinpoint to which area you want to work on. So from there, right from the planning, I think the technocrats are not very good at planning because they don't know the Excel well at that point. So they learn Excel during their entrepreneurial journey. So rather, you need to understand the complete in and out of the project. So before execution, the first thing is to understand the complete project well, so that you don't miss many. You would modify and miss a bit, but you need to understand your business well, so that you can capture almost at least to the good level the complete project on paper.
Excellent. Thank you, Shishir. Thank you very much. Anand, please.
Yeah, very little to add because Shishir and Arun hit the nail on the head. So before I give my last point, I want to thank you, Uday, for pulling us together. Wonderful. And Professor Redana and entire team. Jagdish,
thank you.
All of you. What FABA is doing year on year for all of those 80 or 90 entrepreneurs who had signed in is remarkable. We had none of this a decade ago. So I don't want to take it for granted. So I think it's very important what FABA is doing. Nothing exists like this. And we were completely lost. So you entrepreneurs have some help. Only point to add to what Shishir and Arun said is, while you come up with your idea of doing a startup, please work out the regulatory pathway. Who is going to do what? How long is it going to take? What are the impediments? Are you going to hit something like Biodiversity Act, which is horrible in India, while we have improved phenomenally in other areas, like Arun said, with regulation. So what are the potential bumps you will hit in regulation? And equally importantly, if not more, who is going to raise funding for my company and who is going to be solely focused on grants and equity? So to me, that is a bigger pain point than reagents, equipment, because India is taking care of that part. Actually, our infrastructure is very good. It's lack of funding, it's nascency in regulation, which will come to bite you guys. So just be extra careful about that.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Should we? There are more questions, but I
one last question. If somebody wants to leave, feel free. Anand, I think you're raising and you want to leave.
I'm so sorry. I have to leave. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Professor Redana and everyone. Thank you.
Anand, maybe 1 second. Anand,
bye.
Maybe this question is relevant to you. If you could just give one.
So
are you talking to me?
Into the area for promoting the startup ecosystem in the country. And this is the beginning with the whale tank. And we keep doing more and more activities, but we need the support from all the startups, incubation centers. and of course the investors, and also big pharma and biopharma companies. And in fact, overwhelming response came from the investors and also the big pharma and biotech companies. Though they are not coming directly, but they are going through all the startups presentations, and already some positive response has come from the big pharma and biotech companies. So, but this is the exciting area that we are venturing into, startup entrepreneurship system. Hopefully, we will have more and more sessions like this. Yeah,
outstanding.
Anand.
Uday, can I just add 5 seconds? Is that
please,
for FABA, next year when we have this event, it will be nice to bring some big pharmaceutical, big industrial biotechnology companies along with entrepreneurs. Because I hear this when I go to the United States, Japan, everywhere saying, where are the exits? Why should we put money into your company when your own ecosystem is not doing deals with you guys or acquiring? There are no exits. So that financial inflection is a large piece that we didn't speak about that's amiss in our ecosystem. So as FABA also matures and move into new areas, bringing the large potential buyers or acquirers of this IP with the small companies in the same platform will bring about a complete paradigm shift.
We have a couple of them in the group.
Yeah.
We had somebody in the morning.
Yeah,
But now I
tomorrow's
don't.
session, which Prabhat is moderating.
Yeah, sure, Anand. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Anand.
Thank you, Uday. As always.
Hopefully, see you soon. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Bye.
Yeah.
Yes.
Jagdish, I have one question.
Yes, sir.
I'm leaving too.
Okay.
All right, Shishir. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Please visit Bioness. Let me know, and let's grab lunch together. So.
Sure.
Okay.
Lunch
Thanks,
is due.
Shishir. Yep,
Lunch
thanks.
is on me.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah. Last question before Arun disappears too. So.
Suresh, sir, you want to speak something?
Yes, Jagdish. Thank you, Uday. Thank you, Arun. Actually, this question, I was holding on to it for the separate breakout session with Arun, and Arun ended up being present here. So I'll ask the question. This is a general question, and this is a very open-ended question. Because when startups start and work in the same space, they are trying to do the same thing, similar things personally on their own. I would like to see if there will be synergy, and also there will be speeding up the process if the startups working in the same space can come together. This will cut down the cost as well as they both can become partners and develop things further instead of reinventing the wheel and discovering everything in the first phase in a very difficult manner. So that kind of synergy and startup ecosystem, this is a kind of angel investing, I would say, is the startup that is already working in that space has done it, but then there is a startup that is bringing in a new dimension to that, which the original startup has never thought about. So could that kind of partnership be engaged? I'm sure these kind of forums that FABA is organizing helps. And that's why my question is coming on this forum. So please, Arun, take it and help me understand that, navigate that question.
See, startups actually are kind of, these kind of small entities which are actually supposed to compete with each other. And, it's kind of a more or less a free market environment there. And, obviously competition means it's not like, trying to do negative to the other. It should be healthy competition, right? So that helps the startups, that helps the ecosystem. Having said that, the other part, the collaboration part, that is pretty heavily happening in India at this point of time. If you ask us, we are actually at least taking the services of 8 to 10 startups in India. Say, for example, proteomics, for example, maybe some assays, multiplexing them and things like that. Actually, animal studies, machine learning, etc., etc. So, what if I say, startup A is making, say, a pen, and startup B is also making a pen. Why don't they both collaborate and make a single very good pen? So probably a better pen will come out if they both fight with each other, right? That's the principle of the free market, right? So it really depends on situation to situation. Like say, for example, if you're responding to some pandemic, probably a much more collaborative approach is desirable, wherein 2 to 3 companies will come together. Somebody has better say expertise in terms of fill finish. Somebody is good in say CGMP production. So these things can come together and fasten the product actually. It really depends on the situation, but as such, startups are supposed to have a healthy competition.
Thank you,
Thanks a lot, Arun. Excellent.
Yeah.
So I
can
think
add
we should.
anything?
Please go ahead, Professor Redana.
Yeah, yeah. So when the big pharma and biotech companies are coming together, like Pfizer joining Johnson and Johnson or Novartis to work on a problem, why not startup companies? And in fact, that helps, but it all depends upon case-to-case basis. We have seen during the COVID pandemic, Bharat Biotech collaborating with Indian Immunologicals and use their facility for large-scale production of the vaccine.
Right.
Yeah, why not? But both of them are competing on vaccine market, but at the same time, they came forward and then used the facilities.
Yep. True. Very true. So should we call it a day? Arun, sincerely, I will write to you and hopefully would like to meet with you in Bangalore. So, yep.
Likewise, Dr. Ray. And thank you. Sure. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
All right, Jagdish, it's all
Thank
yours.
Yeah, great.